All right, baby, here we go. Hey, folks, my name is Sung, and I want to help you get a job. And I've been noticing a lot of things, whether it be on LinkedIn or some DMs or the people I'm mentoring right now that are feeling really lost in getting a job, whether they've been recently laid off or they want to pivot into a data career, but it just feels so intimidating, especially in the face of big tech essentially laying off an army of a workforce that feels like they outcompete them. Slash two, they've already looked across Reddit and YouTube tutorials and Blind and Hacker News, and it's all overwhelming, but nothing really feels like it's a cut above the rest. And so I hopefully in this demo or conversation here, I want to give you something really, really juicy to hold on to that will give you a low barrier to entry that you could literally copy and paste and re-record with with even just some of my same dialogue and send it to job applications, send it to interviewers. And you're probably wondering what's in it for me. Who doesn't want to be who doesn't want to be the reason someone gets a job? And my only ask of this is, if this works for you, you DM me or comment and give me that dopamine hit that I'm looking for. Okay? And so step one is, who is this for? This is for the data analyst, data engineer, data scientist. This is for the business analyst. This is for the teacher, the chemical engineer, just anyone who wants a career in data that knows they need more than SQL and Python and a bunch of buzzwords on their resume. Who needs to get past recruiting software algorithms to really make them stand above the rest and be memorable and be worth replying back to in the job application process. And so I think step one is to figure out, who are you trying to impress? Other than recruiting software, you're trying to impress the hiring manager. And I used to be someone who hired people, whether it be at Slalom or even at DBT Labs today. And the main things I'm looking for, one, is just like the bare minimum. Do they have technical skills that show me that I don't have to hold their hand at the beginning when they join our team? And step two, and this is less obvious, but it's through either direct or indirect means, a hiring manager is going to see if you have emotional intelligence and public speaking skills. And they'll do it through questions like, tell me about a weakness, tell me about a project you're proud of, etc. And most of the time, people have crafted an answer and memorize it well enough where it's just like, all right, check off the box. Usually those questions are used to see red flags. But another thing as a hiring manager, especially when it comes to a data analyst role or any kind of a role in data, is, do you know how to articulate why you're building what you're building in the first place? I'm going to see red flags if you're lying to me. And you know how I'm going to do that? I'm going to ask follow-up questions along the way to see if you are just following a script or if you actually know the core concepts that you're talking about. Because yeah, I think it's good and okay enough that you've memorized a script and you've researched the buzzwords that matter and are able to regurgitate them in an eloquent manner. But what really impresses me is when I give you something that's surprising but fair, of a follow-up question. Do you know how to reason your way to a good answer? Because that's a lot more impressive to me, that when something unknown is in front of your face and slapped across, that you know how to do something with it and make me believe in your answer. And so, throughout these next, I would say 5 to 10 minutes or the most, one is something that you could copy and paste and put in your portfolio today. Just make sure you're recording it with your own voice. Hey folks, this is Sung again, and this is me giving the first demo, where you would probably hyperlink this in your resume or put it in your LinkedIn profile to essentially, showcase your technical abilities, your public speaking skills, and just how you teach basic concepts and even complicated ones in a really coherent manner. And so you're going to notice I'm going to shift my tone a bit because when you're doing this, there's a certain kind of commanding authority, a little bit of charisma, and a little bit of calmness, kind of like Bob Ross style of how you want to present this information every single step of the way. And so starting now, I'm going to wear my role-playing hat, and then here we go. All right. So, hey folks, I'm Sung, and if you're watching this, this is going to be an example of how to build a data pipeline from scratch and what that means in the context of an overall data architecture. Throughout these next 5 to 10 minutes, you're going to see me demonstrate a couple things. One, what it looks like to develop using SQL, how to document, how to test, and how to deploy using DBT. And this is all going to be using free and open source tooling. But first is understanding the big picture of why DBT matters, especially for those that are hearing about it for the first time. Is, in the before times, we had to rely on legacy ETL or extract, transform, and load. And you essentially, had to use tools, usually like proprietary GUI tools or what have you, extract raw data from things like Salesforce, for example, transform it outside of the database using things like Spark or other GUI tooling, and then load them into a final database, whether that be SQL Server, Postgres, what have you. But that had a pretty low ceiling pretty fast. And so that's when, cloud data warehouses such as Snowflake, BigQuery, Redshift, Databricks, etc. came into being. And now you can use tools, like Fivetran, Airbyte, Airflow to load data straight into data warehouses like Snowflake. And it makes the whole process a lot smoother and easier. And the final result is, and what matters to the business, is that it saves money, time, and energy, and you get a bigger bench of teammates to hire. Because if you just know SQL, that team can be effective on day one. And so let's get into the mechanics of DBT here. So step one, I'm a data analyst. It's my first day on the job, and I'm using DBT. And let's say I've been using Databricks syntax, my entire career, and your team is using Snowflake for whatever reason. And step one is, how do I be productive with Snowflake on day one if I've never actually used it? Well, the beautiful thing is I don't even have to care about that in the first place, because even if I hard code some SQL that looks like this, select star from, database schema, table name, nothing too crazy here. Out of the box, it auto compiles some syntax that looks like this, create table syntax, DDL. And in the before times without DBT, I would probably have to Google this for 20 to 30 minutes, be a little bit too embarrassed to ask a hiring manager or my teammates for help, and then eventually get it right. Now, instead of having to waste a bunch of that really precious time, DBT automatically handles it for me. So whether I'm using Databricks, Postgres, or Snowflake, whatever, it generates dynamic syntax in order to create that table in the first place. And evolving that concept even further is the idea of a ref statement. And so instead of having to hard code the database and schema name, I just get to reference the actual SQL file name, and it chains it elegantly together. And the main problem that this is solving for is, let's say I do all this great work in my sandbox schema environment. I don't want to have to find and replace everything that says dev and replace it with prod, because that's a very brittle and human error prone process. But instead, the same code that works up above here, this ref statement, elegantly works across both dev and prod without changing any of my code. Now, you're probably wondering to yourself, okay, Sung, you did all this cool stuff. Like, can you show me a real example? I'll do just that. I'm going to go here. I'm going to show you this free repo over here. I'm going to go do everything through the browser, and you can replicate this yourself if you want. And while we're waiting for this to spin up, I'm going to explain the mechanics of what's spinning up, just so I'm not kind of black boxing you here. So overall, what this is doing, it's setting up a Docker container with VS Code running in it, and it's running a bunch of commands that look like this, where it's cloning this respective Git repo, it's changing into that directory, running a virtual environment, downloading the requirements to get DBT working within it and running a bunch of commands to make sure dbt is working as expected in there. And so with that in mind, let's go back here and wait for this to finish being created. And then I'll go straight into a simple example of how the basic mechanics of dbt works in the first place. Now in your video, you're probably going to edit this out, but I'm going to keep it here for the purpose of this demo. Come on, baby, hurry up. There we go. Now it's going to auto run a bunch of commands, and you're going to see some pretty logs, but I'm going to bulldoze past that because I want to show you the core mechanics first before I jump the gun here. Okay, cool. It's doing a bunch of stuff that I expect just to verify that this project is working in the first place. But again, so step one, I'm just going to go to a generic file here. This is stage orders SQL. All I'm really doing is, bringing in, this is a common table expression, doing another one just to make sure I grab only the columns that I care about from this reference above, and then selecting from it. Nothing too crazy here. And in order to run this specific file, I'm going to do this. Now, I'm going to explain this command while this is running. What this is doing is I'm running it, I'm pointing it to the exact SQL file that I want it to run, and then it says OK. Now, again, let's pretend it's my first time running this in this project. I'm second guessing myself, like, hey, what is the exact SQL that was run against, my database to create a view in this case as I expected. That's where we go over to the target over here, go to run, we go to models, staging, and stage orders, and we get to see exactly the syntax that was used. And so you see here, all I'm doing is it's creating a view and it's wrapping that exact SQL that I cared about, all automatically. And so I don't even have to second guess myself that this is working as expected. The next step from this is thinking to myself, so I did all this great work. I'm probably thinking like, hey, how exactly do I test this to make sure this looks good? Because I don't want to live in the before times where I'm publishing this into prod and then doing a select star from limit 5, eyeballing it and going like, yeah, it looks kind of okay. I don't think that's good enough anymore. And so instead, what we have is something called dbt tests. And that looks something like this. And so let's focus on starting on line 11. Instead of going through that whole rigmarole that I just illustrated with just a couple keywords on lines 14 through 16, I get to automatically test what the stage orders table can look or does or looks like. And so what that means is a couple things like this. When I run this command, what it'll do is pick up those keywords and automatically generate the SQL to run those tests in the first place. Now, you're probably wondering to yourself, what is the exact SQL that was run to test those things in the first place? Well, this is the exact SQL I'm going to show you in a bit. Here, stage orders. Let's look at not null. This is the exact SQL that was run to verify that there are no nulls in that column. Same thing when it comes to the order ID and making sure that it's unique. And the general kind of design pattern of this is if it returns any rows, those are errors. And you notice here, in just literally like a couple milliseconds, we're able to verify that what I envision as a primary key is actually functioning as such because it's unique and not null. And now this is where I'm going to ask you, how do you test your data? I'm going to play a little Dora the Explorer here and let you reflect. And let me know if it's better or worse than this. And let's start a conversation about that. Step 2 is thinking to myself, so I developed and I tested. How do I document this and share it with business people that I care about? Think of like the finance analyst and the FP&A team. Think the marketing analyst that's running their next campaign. And you're looking at this and you're probably wondering to yourself as you perused, like, hey, how come, Sung, you wrote a bunch of just random descriptions in these kind of like YAML files? Like, business people aren't going to look at this. And I agree with you. They're not going to look at YAML files to get their business context. And thankfully, that's why we have something called dbt docs. And I'm going to run a couple commands here. And what this is doing is it's taking up all these configuration files and SQL files, generating an out-of-the-box website, and serving that on a local server. So over here, you notice it's on a local host. I'm going to open it up. And over here, we get this documentation website. And you don't need to know CSS, HTML, JavaScript, none of that. This just comes out of the box with dbt. And the main thing people care about is this, where overall I get to see my bronze, silver, and gold layers and my entire data lineage within my dbt universe. So I know for a fact, step by step, I have raw data loaded in by a loader. Think things like Fivetran, Airbyte, Airflow. I massage that data further. I already illustrated what stage orders can look and feel like, and then I join them together to create, the final gold tables for consumption at the business layer. Now, you're probably wondering, like, why does all this matter? Well, I think the big thing is in the context of a scenario that looks like this. So let's say I'm a finance analyst. It's my first day on the job, and I'm shoulder tapping the data analyst here, and I'm wondering, like, hey, data analyst, like, I was told to, do a revenue by month forecast based on something called the orders table from a manager. Can you give me some context here? And instead of DMing each other back and forth in 30 minutes with ad hoc queries and screenshots, I could just give this finance analyst a 2-minute tutorial. And so step by step, I give this link to dbt docs and say, hey, step by step, hey, you care about the orders table, right? So let's do that. Let's just refocus on that so we understand exactly what we're working with. Step by step, it looks like we have these 2 raw data sources. We massage them to clean them up a bit, and then we join them together. Now, the real meat and potatoes of what you care about is within the documentation over here. And this is where you take a look at this and you're going like, okay, so here's exactly where I can find it within my respective database. I get some basic information. I even get plain language descriptions for how this data is working throughout. I even get to understand what was even tested at a column by column level, and even get to see the exact code that was run against that database in the first place. And let's say I'm like super skeptical as a finance person. It's like, hey, is this exactly the data that I want in the shape that I want? Yeah. So if I go over here, I can even show you a quick example of that. It looks something like this. Ducks. Here we go. I'm gonna copy and paste this. I'm gonna close out of this real quick. Allow. Do that. I'm gonna go back into this website. I'm gonna copy to clipboard, and I'm gonna run it, and bam! If I'm the finance analyst, I'm eyeballing this data. Mind you, this would be in your respective database, such as like Snowflake, Postgres, Databricks, and you think to yourself, oh hey, like, yeah, this is exactly the shape of the data that I'm looking for. Thanks, Sung. And you notice how that entire tutorial took what, like maybe 1 to 2 minutes? And now in the future, it will probably just take 30 seconds. Because if they ask another similar question like that, I was like, hey, I was told to get all the information on customers as much as possible. Oh, over here, do this, and go through that same exercise. And now imagine those same 30 minutes times, 1,000 that your data analyst and your business person never have to have again, because they have all the context they need at their fingertips. All right, cool. This is where I'm going to ask you the question. I'm going to do this Dora the Explorer style again. How do you document your data? How do you build trust with people on the business side without having to take 30-minute DMs every time you have to answer basic shoulder tap questions? All right, I'll leave it to you in the comments. Now you're probably wondering to yourself, after all this work, my next logical question as a developer is, how do I get all of this work into production? That's where you use the Git pull request workflow that people know and love, for decades. And so step 1 is this. I'm gonna make a dummy commit here, just to show you how this looks and feels like. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do this. Check out B. I'm gonna make a new branch, new feature branch. Okay. Next, I'm going to add a new commit, test commit. Git. I'm going to add all my changes, which is a single file. I'm going to make a new message. Okay. And then I'm going to push. Now it's going to give me an error as I expect, but that's okay, because it's going to give me some correction to that. Now I've officially pushed my changes to the remote branch, which is using GitHub. Now, if I go back to GitHub and refresh this page, it's going to give me a prompt to compare and pull request. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to create this pull request. And what this is going to do is, one, show me the exact differences that are taking place here. And then depending, run some automatic CI/CD checks just to make sure that my dbt job is working as I expect. And that's all I have to do. Now, mind you, this isn't the case of a free demo out there, but I probably customize this to be specific to run only the changes in scope. And that's about it. And so you notice here, throughout this entire kind of demo, we developed something from scratch, we tested it, we showed some documentation, and we went through just a quick and simple pull request workflow. Yeah. I hope this is useful for you. So next time you're wondering, how do I build a data pipeline from scratch? Share this video, and we can evolve the conversation from there. All right, talk to you later. Bye. All right, and scene. So you notice here, I'm going to kind of do a retrospective on what I just demonstrated here. Every step of the way, I made it really clear what I was doing with my clicks. And you notice how after each kind of technical mechanic I was demoing, I gave a very clear and coherent explanation for why I was doing that in the first place. Whether that was in a business scenario or just, soothing the audience that I know exactly what I'm talking about and I'm not just like blazing past a bunch of, technical mumbo jumbo. And so, yeah, I hope this is useful for you. Make your own demo, add a bit of your own spice to it, and you can even, DM me and I can give it a review and help you out. All right, peace.